it rolling, Bob? Is it rolling, Bob?
Is it rolling, Bob?
Hi folks, welcome back to Bob Dylan, a head full of ideas. This is season 4 of this podcast, which is looking at Dylan's songs throughout his entire career in a kind of slightly mad random order. I'm the author of a book called Determined to Stand, which looks at Dylan's later work. Currently working on a book called Minstrel Boy, which looks at his mid-period work, and there'll be another book which will be about Dylan's early work. So there's a kind of trilogy in reverse. Do check out my website, chrisgregory.org, otherwise known as From the Pen of Chris Gregory, and you'll actually see a copy of the text I'm going to be reading from today there, and lots of other stuff about Bob Dylan and lots of other interesting things. Anyway, so this is part 2 of Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie. We've previously talked about Guthrie's influence on Dylan. We talked about Dylan's appearance at Woody Guthrie concert after he died in 1968, and some of the songs on his first album. So here we go. Dylan's singing style has always been controversial, despite the many changes he has gone through. But Dylan learned from Guthrie, as well as from many blues and hillbilly singers, that songs that contained important messages would come over more effectively if the vocal delivery was actually abrasive. This meant that listeners could either listen into the message or reject the song. But in Guthrie's aesthetic, messages were always more important than the melodies. Like many other folk singers, he quite happily borrowed melodies from other songs, perhaps hoping that the familiarity of the music might help the message to be put over. Even This Land Is My Land uses what you might call a found melody. It's the melody of Oh My Loving Brother, a well-known gospel hymn. Its tune also closely resembles that of the country standard You Are My Sunshine, first recorded by Jimmy Davis in 1940. Such practices, which Pete Seeger has identified as part of the folk process, have remained a feature of Dylan's work throughout his career, often leading to misplaced allegations of plagiarism. Perhaps the most important quality that Dylan imbued from Guthrie, however, was that of authenticity. Although Dylan made it as a result of his success in the Greenwich Village folk scene, it's hard to imagine how Guthrie would have fit in to the often dogmatic, patronising attitude of middle-class folkies that Dylan himself railed against when he moved from being a folk singer to a rock star. Dylan was a famous star from a very young age and certainly did not experience the physical and financial hardships that Guthrie went through. But he has always maintained a considerable distance between himself and the trappings of showbiz. He has avoided any kind of celebrity lifestyle, never appears on chat shows, and especially in his later career, has avoided the ways of getting easy applause from audiences that most rock performers employ. Given that the young Dylan presented reporters, radio hosts, and co-performers with a fictionalised account of his life, it is perhaps surprising that Song for Woody doesn't actually add to this mythology. In fact, Dylan is surprisingly honest and self-deprecating in the song. He uses the tune of Guthrie's harrowing 1913 massacre, an account of the murder of strikers and their children, which Dylan had performed at Carnegie Chapter Hall in 1961, although Guthrie himself seems to have appropriated the lyric from the traditional song One Morning in May, otherwise known as The Bold Grenadier. The first verse makes it clear that Dylan sees himself as a wandering minstrel in the Guthrie tradition. I'm out here 1,000 miles from my home, he sings, rather tentatively, walking a road other men have gone down. He explains that he now sees the world through Guthrie's perspective. I'm seeing your world of people and things, your paupers and peasants and princes and kings. The expression people and things is a little vague, but the following line, with its pronounced alliteration, is an effective summary of Woody's view of human equality. Dylan then addresses Woody directly. Hey, Woody Guthrie, I wrote you a song. The next line, about a funny old world that's coming along. catches Guthrie's tone exactly. The expression funny old world may be something of a cliche, but it expresses a part cynical, part humorous attitude in imitation of Woody's own tone very effectively. The philosophical personification in the next lines seems sick and hungry, it's tired and it's torn, it looks like it's dying and it's hardly been born. It could easily be a line from Bound for Glory. Dylan clearly indicates here that he identifies with Guthrie's worldview, which prioritises society's underdogs and focuses on inequalities in the sick world they live in. He admits that there's not many men that done the things that you've done. Again, the expression may be a little vague, but it's completely heartfelt. The penultimate verse pays tribute to some of the folk singers that Guthrie was associated with. Here's to Cisco and Sonny and Leadbelly too, and all the good people that travel with you, referring to Cisco Houston, Sonny Terry, and Huddy Ledbetter. These economical lines extend the respect Dylan shows to Woody to other contemporary folk pioneers that he admires. Here's to the hearts and the hands of the men, he sings, who come with the dust and are gone with the wind. That's partly taken from Guthrie's Pastures of Plenty. It evokes Guthrie's Dust Bowl songs to describe a group of singers who bear witness to the plight of the disadvantaged in American society, despite the opprobrium placed upon them by politicians and other defenders and upholders of the status quo. Finally, Dylan signs off by announcing that he will soon be, in true Guthrie style, taking to the road very soon. But he emphasises that the very last thing that I'd want to do is to say I've been hitting some hard travelling too. This is a neat twist with a double meaning of the last thing, in which Dylan ruefully seems to be acknowledging that despite the mythology he had built up around himself, his own life experience cannot really be compared to that of Woody or his fellow travellers. Song to Woody is the song of a young man paying tribute to his legendary elder. It is without doubt Dylan's first significant composition, communicating a very profound and genuine love as well as immense respect for Woody himself. The remarkable final lines, however, with their pronounced humility, already appear to acknowledge that Dylan himself has led a very different life to his mentor. Therefore, what follows in his career is bound to diverge from Woody's path. He is not destined, like rambling Jack Elliott, to become one of the sons of Woody Guthrie. By 1963, Dylan had written so many of his own songs that he was no longer covering Guthrie material. In the years that followed, he rarely returned to them, even during the 1990s when he played hundreds of folk and blues songs by other artists. This Land Is Your Land, however, was used as the finale during the first part of the Rolling Thunder Tour in 1975. In 1976, he played Woody's Deportee as a duet with Joan Baez. In 1988, he recorded a stunning version of Pretty Boy Floyd, I think mentioned earlier, full of unique vocal gymnastics. In 2009, he played Do Re Mi, a cynical black comic discourse on American materialism that Woody wrote for a charity show. The apparent lack of attention to Guthrie's work in his later career might seem surprising, but it seems that fairly early on, Dylan reached the point where he needed to go beyond Guthrie's influence. At his concert in New York Town Hall in October 1963, when he was called back for an encore, he did something quite extraordinary. Instead of turning out one of his own hits, like you normally would do for an encore, and he had a few by that time, he explains to the audience that he's been asked to write a short testimonial for a forthcoming book in order to explain what Woody meant to him. But there was no way he could keep this down to the assigned 25-word limit. So for the only time in his career, he performs a poem on stage. This is his epic poem, as you might call it, Last Thoughts on Woody Guthrie. And really, I guess, along with the sleeve notes to Joan Baez in Concert Volume 2, Poem to Joni, this is, I guess, Dylan's most outstanding example of an actual poem. It is a remarkably powerful piece which, although entirely spoken, is filled with musical cadences and could easily, but for its length, be performed with musical backing. What is perhaps most surprising, however, is that the poem tells us virtually nothing about Guthrie. There are no references to any of his songs, his autobiography, or his life story. Dylan makes no mention of Woody's experiences in the Dust Bowl, his hard travelling around the country, his political views, or the origins of his musical style. Instead, the poem is an intensely personal response to that question about Woody. It is a summation of Guthrie's influence, which thus stands squarely between Dylan's past and his future. The poem is about 200 lines long. Dylan delivers it in 7 minutes, and that's quite a feat. He does it at quite a frenetic pace. Its form resembles the long works of Allen Ginsberg, such as Howl and Kaddish, although Dylan relies more on rhyme and para-rhyme for the effects. The tone of the language is colloquial. The rhymes are delivered at random intervals in a way that keeps drawing the listener's attention back to the words. The driving rhythm is constant, keeping mostly within the 8-bar structure that dominates blues and rock music. The poem is full of random imagery, some of it a little awkward. There are many effective collocations of words. Like much of the work of the beat poets, Last Thoughts gives the impression of being a spontaneous, improvised composition which could easily be delivered over a jazz backing. The poem is, which is what the beat poets used to do, the poem is addressed to society in general as well as to the poet himself. Most remarkably, it expresses a continuous pattern of thought to the extent that it's almost like an extremely long 200-line sentence. The use of the second-person address is maintained throughout. Dylan begins with a lengthy diatribe against the ills of the modern world, especially the culture of American commercialism and advertising. He castigates the shallowness of the contemporary culture around him in no uncertain terms. He then advises the EU character being addressed as to how to rise above the strictures of contemporary life he's just listed. There's no doubt that the emotions Dylan conveys in the poem are deeply personal. Although the sole reference to Woody comes right at the end, he attempts to identify and empathise with Guthrie's world view, railing against the superficiality of a world blinded by materialistic values. From the outset, the poem focuses on figures who are society's victims. When your head gets twisted and your mind grows numb, when you think you're too old, too smart and too dumb, Dylan throws in a plethora of metaphors, apparently chosen at random to express the position of the confused and downtrodden for whom life is described as a slow-motion crawl. He pities those for whom the wine don't come to the top of your cup. He uses imagery of wind blowing, trains running, streets being curved rather than straight, the reins on your pony slipping. Deserts and valleys are transformed into depressing urban chaos. And he goes into full-on Guthrie mode in lines of extended para-rhyme that could have come from Bound for Glory. And the lightnings are flashing, and the thunders are crashing, and the windows are rattling and breaking, and the rooftops are shaking, and your whole worlds are slamming and banging. Then we hear the voice of the subject of the poem as he moves seamlessly from second to third person. To yourself, you sometimes say, I never knew it was going to be this way. Why didn't it tell me the day I was born? The images of discontent and multiply. The subject is said to be knee-deep in water, not quite drowning yet. The strangely illogical line, the whole world's a watching with a window-peak stare, seems to reflect on his own position as a famous person, whose privacy and therefore mental health is under considerable threat. The line, your jackhammer falls from your hands to your feet, is an obscure reference to Guthrie's song Jackhammer Blues, in which the implement symbolises the pride of the working man. That's the implement that you make holes in the pavement with, isn't it? Yes. Gambling terminology is also thrown in. You were faked out and fooled while facing a 4 flush, and all the time you were holding 3 queens. The subject's mind is left bouncing around a pinball machine. Later, a lion's mouth opens, intending to devour him. Dylan then switches to the first person as he portrays the subject questioning his entire life. You say to yourself, just what am I doing? On this road I'm walking, on this trail I'm turning, on this curve I'm hanging, on this pathway I'm strolling, in the space that I'm taking, in this air I'm inhaling. We hear that the subject would try his very best not to allow all this self-doubt to overwhelm him. You try with your whole soul best never to think these thoughts and never to let them kind of thoughts gain ground or to make your heart pound. Then the fact that he has indeed been addressing himself becomes pointedly obvious as he refers to various musical instruments he is playing. He begins to ask himself some pertinent questions. Who am I helping? What am I breaking? What am I giving? What am I taking? There's another switch back to second person as Dylan warns that despite the pressures of the world that he's recounted, it's crucial to remain positive. But you try with your whole soul best never to think these thoughts and never to let them kind of thoughts gain ground. One of the poem's key lines is, you know that it's something special you needed. Now he begins to search for solutions, employing more train imagery as he argues that you need something special, all right. You need a fast-flying train on a tornado track to shoot you someplace and shoot you back. Although he mentions social elements that need to be changed, such as you need a Greyhound bus that don't bar no race, the main focus now is an internal rather than external truth. In some of the poem's most crucial lines, we are told that you need something to open your eyes. You need something to make it know that it's you and no one else that owns that spot you're standing on, that space that you're sitting. The rest of the poem concerns a search for personal fulfillment in what seems to be a hope-starved world. As we begin to move towards a conclusion, the pace of the reading quickens. Dylan begins a long rant against the fake nature of much of materialistic contemporary culture, explaining how so much fails to provide the indefinable quality he's searching for. We learn that hope cannot be found on a dollar bill, in big stores full of material goods, in what, presumably referring to the sanitized nature of much of American cinema, he metaphorically describes as Hollywood wheat germ, or in the mindless entertainment provided in nightclubs. Some of the funniest lines follow, as Dylan, in search of what he calls hope, declares, "It ain't in the pimple lotion people are selling you, and he ain't in no cardboard box house or down any movie star's blouse." He rails against the diamond store's dummies or bubblegum goons and attacks society's manipulators and tricksters who try to sell various forms of false hope, as well as the middlemen who exploit artists, the no-talent fools that run around gallant and make rules for the ones that got talent. The section reaches a climax as he declares dramatically, "Ain't there no one here that knows where I'm at? Ain't there no one here that knows how I feel? Good God Almighty, that stuff ain't real." The quality that Dylan defines as hope can, it seems, only be found in the kind of authenticity that Guthrie represents. The poem ends with Dylan asking in a number of different ways where this hope can be found, until he finally gives us his highly equivocal answer, bringing the poem to a very memorable conclusion. You'll find God in the church of your choice. You'll find Woody Guthrie in Brooklyn State Hospital. And though it's only my opinion, I may be right or wrong, you'll find them both in the Grand Canyon at sundown. Wow. From this moment onwards, Dylan's artistic leanings will begin to shift. Having composed the many striking and decidedly Guthrie-esque protest songs that have made his name, he will now begin to write far more personal material. His musical style will soon evolve away from the basic approach of guitar harmonica vocals that he had borrowed from Guthrie, both upsetting and revolutionizing the folk music community as he does so. It seems as if, by composing this poem, he has realized that the real lessons he's learned from Guthrie are not just social or political. Woody has taught him to be true to himself, to follow his own path wherever it leads. Now he can move on towards creating some of his most resonant work, having shaken off the need to follow Guthrie's specific example. In these profound last thoughts, Dylan appears to have truly understood Woody's philosophy of life. The beautiful final image, which is in itself redolent of the nature patriotism of "This Land Is Your Land," indicates that to Dylan, Guthrie has been not only an artistic and emotional, but also a kind of spiritual master, whose ghost will always be at his shoulder, overlooking his songs mostly, but perhaps not always giving approval. Well, that's it for now. It's great just being able to read those lyrics out. I do think Last Thoughts on Woody Guthrie is a magnificent piece of work and is extremely underestimated. I'll be back next time And what we got next time coming up? Next time coming up, just reading here, it says we have Highway 61 Revisited. Well, you can't miss that, can you? See you then on Highway 61. Bye.
Is it rolling, Bob? Is it rolling, Bob?
Is it rolling, Bob?